Question, somebody other than Sam first, go to Sam. Peter.
More a remark, I think, I'm not trying to be high-minded here, I apologize, but you opened up with vulnerability when you said, who are Bedford's for? And I think at the end you answered it, we're to convert, if we're to disciple, if we're to, nourish and all that. That was the anybody who doesn't have the gospel, isn't that, it doesn't matter the facade or whatever they have, the addictions are still there, the problems are still there.
I think you are correct in a spiritual sense. And now let me explain what I mean. I think, yes, it's correct. You are correct in saying we are called not just to the lowly, like as far as the culture would dictate or would define the lowly. We are called to all people, not with the gospel. In a spiritual sense, anyone without the gospel is destined for death and therefore is lowly. Agreed? Agreed. I do think that scripture makes a distinction between those who are rich and those who are lowly, not just in a spiritual sense, but also in a materialistic sense. And the reason for that, as best as I can tell, because we see it in James, where he does distinguish between someone who walks in with rings on his fingers and a beautiful cloak, and somebody who walks in with raggedy clothes. If there were no distinction as far as who was high and who was low, James wouldn't have used that illustration. He wouldn't have used that description. In the same way, Jesus defines the least of these, not just as those without faith, but as those who have no cloak, who have no food, who have no water. And so, yes, you are correct. We are always called to all people. And obviously, Paul and James would agree with this. It is not as though James is saying, don't minister to the rich. Yes, minister to the rich in material, that is. But what he is saying is there is a human tendency to lean towards those who have materialistic means, as opposed to those who lack materialistic means. To those who have, there's the human tendency to lean towards these people and welcoming these people. And that's for any number of reasons. Generally, people who have means, I think, generally the people in our congregation tend to have means. And there are more social niceties that we all sort of are able to perform with each other, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But as reality, we tend to bend this way. And so I think the reason that we have this here, where there is an expression of bending towards the lowly, is to keep us from being high-minded, to keep us to a recognition that humans will do that. If we sort of have this idea of we're going to reach out to everyone equally, but don't specifically make sure that we're seeking the lowly as well, we're going to ignore the lowly. It's a human reality, is what he's saying. And so there is this expression of ensure that you are also pursuing those without means. Ensure that you are even prioritizing them, because as you prioritize those without means, people are going to see that. People are going to see the compassion that you have for those without means. There's more ability, even as well, practically speaking, for the church to pour out love in meaningful material ways to those without means. And I think it only increases the witness towards God. So I agree with you. Anyone who does not have faith is spiritually lowly. But Scripture also calls us to consider with specific emphasis those in culture who are lowly in a societal sense, I think.
And I do apologize. I do have some difficulty with that, because
Go
to
ahead.
me, it's black or white. It's like either you're saved or you're not. Everybody's going to profess him Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and he's going to be dead. If the rich don't get the gospel truth, they will, obviously, but I guess somebody has to deliver it.
Yeah.
You're here in Bedford. So what is the church going to be all about if you don't go out people's homes, knock on their doors, all this stuff? How are you going to get your message out? How are you going to do this?
I agree. I don't disagree with any of what you just said. All I'm saying is I think there is how do you put it? There's an emphasis on the societally lowly, because if we don't have an emphasis, we will ignore them.
Yeah.
We need both. So we are absolutely called, like, may it never be as well that we have a maximum threshold for worship either, which I think is how I would characterize your concern. Like, may it not be that we have a maximum threshold for worship. That's what you're telling us. May that not be as well. That's what you're saying. We're like, oh, you're very well off. You don't need to hear what I have to say. How repugnant is that as a concept? That a person, just because they are well off, doesn't deserve to hear the gospel. I mean, that's absurd. And may it never be. I'm not saying one to the exclusion of the other. I'm saying an emphasis here because that ensures the inclusion of the whole. That's sort of what I'm trying to get at.
I think Daniel and Becky had a question or comment.
Yep. So in regards to living peaceably with all men, they teach us in recovery that when you go to make amends with someone, which a simple way to define amends is saying I'm sorry, that you don't go in expecting the person to be all, I was so wrong when I hurt you. You don't go in thinking that. You go in to make the amends with, this is where I am at fault and I'm not expecting anything in return. And I think so oftentimes as Christians, we forget that part of the process, that, you know, when we're wrong, we promptly ask for forgiveness. Because it's easy for us as Christians to say, oh, well, okay, well, I just told you I'm sorry. When are you going to tell me you're sorry for your part? And that's not part of keeping peace with all men. Keeping peace with all men, as far as we are concerned, is this is the wrong that I have committed against you, and I am apologizing to you for it, but I am doing this in selfless, sacrificial love, and I am not expecting anything in return.
Right. No, I think it's well put. Yeah, just if you've wronged someone and you apologize and you seek to make amends, that person might take that and never extend the same nicety your direction, or the same apology your direction, and you need to be all right with that. Thank you, Becky. Dave.
We moved on. It's just continued. It's nothing.
Okay. Yes, Johnny.
Something about that peace conversation you're talking about. But so here's something I was thinking about. I wonder if part of the reason why they had the like pay extra attention, like associated with lowly, is part of it is like if you're if you're just associating with the where you're focusing on the upper levels of society, the upper levels of society just as a norm tend to exclude the lower levels of society. If we go and say, oh, we want to make sure that all the rich people in Bedford feel welcomed here, we'll go make sure there's some sort of minimum things. We don't have a whole bunch of poor people here. That way they want to come. We don't do that sort of thing.
And again, I think it's an element of not you focus exclusively on the poor. Right? This is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a matter of if you focus on including the poor, everyone is included.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And I think you're right. And again, I would say, excuse me, I've seen ministries. I worked with a ministry where there was this mentality that if a person was from enough means, they had no place in this ministry. It's like, how absurd is this? It was a college ministry out in Cincinnati. In terms of when I was doing collegiate ministry the year before Jenny and I got married, I was working with a group in Cincinnati, which was I didn't really understand the full breadth of it at the time, but it was a progressive Christian community, is how it was referred to. Where lots of very progressive ideas and liberal ideas, very left-leaning on almost every social issue, with sort of loose biblical connection from time to time. And there was this mentality of focusing in on the passages of scripture that said that cursed are the poor for they have received. Sorry, cursed are the rich for they have received their comfort, but blessed are the poor for their comfort is yet to come. The Beatitudes, like they're focusing on that sort of thing where it's like, we need to go to the lowly alone. And if a rich person comes along, we reject that person. It's like, it's absurd. That's so stupid because it ignores the fact that regardless of social stratum, we are all in need of the gospel. I mean, that's the whole point of verses of Romans chapters 1-3. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All are in need of the gospel, rich and poor alike. So again, Peter, I don't want to have you hear anything other than me saying that all require the gospel. But as a matter of organizing church life, as a matter of organizing a church, organizing ministry, may it be that we do maybe not emphasize or prioritize, maybe that's the wrong word, but we remember the poor. And if we were remembering the poor, we are doing things that include the poor. We are seeking to include the poor whenever, like, again, materially lowly, whenever we go about and doing something, because if we don't, they're not going to be included. Whereas a rich person is sort of de facto included as far as society is concerned. So it's a matter of casting the wide net, not a matter of only caring for a certain group of oppressed people, if you will. I saw Donna then Dave.
Yeah, I just had one quick comment that somebody could be perceived as being rich or wealthy and they're not, and vice versa. I have a friend that works for the Bedford school and she is amazed at how many kids come to school without breakfast because they can't afford, 3 square meals a day. Probably because they're paying their taxes, but my sister-in-law's brother is extremely wealthy. And to look at him, you would think the opposite.
Right.
So you don't always know somebody's situation. I don't know if you're talking about just material wealth, but
Largely material wealth, and I think scripture actually does make the distinction between those who are materially wealthy and those who are not. Again, not in the sense of needing the gospel or not, but in the sense of look, they are treated differently based on those things in society. We'll go to Dave then Alan.
Since you got back to it, we like to be around people who are like us.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is a challenge, is to be diverse without, unity without uniformity.
Right.
We don't need to be carbon copies of each other.
Right. Right. No, I think that's well put.
Yeah.
Alan, and then we'll probably close.
I think the rich and the poor share so many problems.
Yes.
They're lonely. Often the rich are extremely lonely, as well as the poor. They may have health problems. They may be mourning the loss of a spouse. We don't know what their situations are. The only thing we can do is whoever we meet. And whoever we come in contact with, we should treat them that they need Christ in their life.
Agreed. 100% correct. I'm not gonna, I won't fight that at any point. That's completely correct. And if you've heard me say something else, talk to me afterwards, because I'm not saying anything else. Let's close.